Alright, hello and welcome to the Buffy Commentary Project. This is Season 1, Episode 1, Welcome to the Hellmouth. Before we get started, just a quick outline of what you can expect from these videos. They'll be focused on analysis and analysis only, rather than being summaries or reviews.
That would never happen.
We'll be going scene by scene, much like a commentary track, and looking at what the show is doing artistically from moment to moment. We'll be digging into the show's themes, motifs, symbols, and techniques as they occur, and also as they develop over time. Every episode will likely have spoilers for the entire show, since our goal here is to understand Buffy as a total piece of art. We want to understand not just how each individual piece of each episode works on its own, but also how all these pieces add up to what the whole thing is. And in order to do that, we need to be able to talk about the show in its entirety at any given moment. If that all sounds like something that interests you, then let's get going. So the first episode of a season, let alone a show, is important to pay attention to, because if it's any good, it'll be a thesis statement for the rest of it. At the very least, it'll be doing setup. Not just in terms of things like plot or character, but, more importantly for our purposes here, in terms of ideas. And it so happens that this show is good. Right away, what I want to point out here is the horror aesthetic that's being used. These dark shadows, this creepy music, these lingering shots. I also want to point out that this horror aesthetic is being applied to a high school specifically. People often describe the premise of the high school seasons of Buffy as high school as hell, and you can see that playing out clearly from the show's first seconds. You have a high school, and its hallways and classrooms are being treated as a horror set. But I also just want to talk about what a high school is. A high school is a familiar place. It's not home, but you spend your days there. It's a place of everyday life. So for this familiar place to be turned into a place of horror, I think speaks to the show's larger project of telling a story about growing up that eventually goes beyond high school. Because Buffy is about the horrors of growing up, that means it's about the horrors in those banal, everyday spaces. The horrors of your own psychology. It's about your mom who steals your identity, or your boyfriend who betrays you. It's about going to college, working a minimum wage job, or losing the people you love. But that story starts here, in high school, with this first familiar place that's been twisted into a horror movie. Now I'm assuming you've seen this episode, so you know what's going to happen at the end of this scene. So let's talk about the twist, and how it's setting up yet another idea. The idea of subversion and surprise, particularly with regards to gender and genre. We already got one jump scare earlier, with the broken window. But the interesting thing about that jump scare is that despite being a jump scare, it might actually put you off your guard. It's a typical horror trope that leads one to expect that the show might just be playing horror straight. This whole prolonged scene seems like it's right out of a horror playbook. It lulls you into complacency, making you think that you know exactly what's going to happen.
There's nobody here.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay.
But then here, aha! The scared teenage girl is actually the vampire. This was the real jump scare all along. So right away, this introductory scene has given us a ton of information. It says this show is horror. It's horror about high school and other everyday things, and also it's going to subvert horror. I wanted to let that play because the theme music itself actually brilliantly echoes the premise from the opening scene. The theme starts out with a typical horror movie church organ, suggesting the boring cliches of the horror genre. And then suddenly, bam, the rock music bursts through it. To use Joss Whedon's own commentary on this episode, it is, quote, basically trying to tell people exactly what the show is in the credits, which is, here's a girl who has no patience for a horror movie, who is not going to be the victim, who is not going to be in the scary organ horror movie. She's going to bring her own youth and rocking attitude to it. I'm a great believer in actually knowing what's going to happen in the show when you see the credits, so I very much wanted to state the mission up front. Now okay, we're in an intimate familiar place again, Buffy's bedroom. Buffy's house plays an important symbolic role over the course of the show. generally being used as a metaphor for Buffy's self and sense of domestic stability. So by starting here in Buffy's room, we're once again starting with one of the basics of the show. We're starting with Buffy's self. Because if horror and the subversion of it is one pillar of the show, then the other pillar is the existentialist project of becoming who you are. I call this a show about growing up, but what that really means is that it's a show about selfhood. So if Buffy's house is Buffy's self, and we're at the beginning of a show about selfhood, then what can we infer about Buffy's self from this scene? We can infer that it's uneasy, haunted as it is by ominous dreams full of blood and fire and religious iconography. More importantly, from the scattered boxes that we'll see in a second, we can infer that her self is in an unfinished state. Buffy is at the beginning of her project of becoming who she is, apprehensive of the trials she suspects are to come.
No, wouldn't want that.
Now here's our high school again in the daytime. One of the things this show loves doing is creating a contrast between the surface of things and what lies beneath. The mission of the show might be, in Whedon's words, nothing is what it seems, but that doesn't mean the show just cares about random twists. It means it cares about this tension between surface and subtext, between metaphor and reality, between the things people do and the emotions they're really feeling, between the conscious and the unconscious. It's about that gooey underbelly beneath the things we take for granted. So the first scene started us out with an underbelly version of both a familiar high school setting as well as a familiar horror movie trope. Then it suggested dreams and the unconscious with Buffy's vision. But now here we are back on the surface. We're back in the daytime, in the sunny high school movie setting, in the sunny town of Sunnydale. As the episode and the season proceeds, keep track of how many times the show creates these sorts of contrasts, weaving between a surface appearance or expectation and something more sinister or complicated underneath.
God! Okay, I feel good.
Even this shot of Xander looking up at Willow suggests the idea of something above and something below.
I kinda had a problem with the math.
Which part?
The math. Can you help me out tonight, please? Be my study buddy.
Well, what's in it for me?
A shiny nickel.
Okay. Do you have theories and
Or take the way that Xander and Jesse at first perceive Buffy from the outside. She's a pretty girl Xander sees from behind, or someone that Jesse only knows as New Girl.
New girl.
That's right, I saw her.
Right now, the reality of Buffy is unknown and invisible to everyone around her.
What's the sitch? What do you know about her?
New girl.
Well, you're certainly a font of nothing.
Buffy Summers, sophomore.
Now here's another scene that's about to underscore Buffy's outsider status. We already got a hint of it with Jesse and Xander, and with Joyce's line that I talked over earlier.
And honey? Try not to get kicked out. I promise.
But now it's going to play out in earnest, as Flutie and Buffy discuss the circumstances of her expulsion and readmittance. This is yet another very important tension that will remain throughout the run of the show. The tension between isolation and belonging, which in turn is connected to that tension between the surface and the hidden. As the Slayer, Buffy feels that she cannot belong. She has a secret identity, which means she can't share the truth of herself with other people. Her super strength marks her as physically alien, and her duty to save lives means that she's constantly doing things that get her in trouble with acceptable society.
Wasn't that bad.
You burned down the gym.
I did. I really did.
She burns down gyms and gets kicked out of school as a result. Even a welcoming man like Flutie is skeptical that her nature is a fit with his social institution. In other words, Buffy's own self has a hidden underbelly. A part of herself, just like all of us might have parts of ourselves that we feel we cannot share with the world around us. Parts of ourselves that we're ashamed of, scared of, or even not fully aware of. But no matter how hard we try to rip that self up, we still can't really get rid of it. Over the course of the episode, season, and show, we'll see the secret parts of Buffy's identity begin to seep through the cracks. Just like in this scene when Buffy spills her bag and steak into a public hallway. But I also think there's another level to this scene, and it has to do with Xander.
Can I help you?
Because Buffy is the central character of her show, most of the other characters tend to represent parts of her, and that goes for the core Scoobies more than most. In Primeval, the show explicitly labels Willow as Buffy's spirit or spiritus, Giles is Buffy's mind, or sophis, and Xander is Buffy's heart, or animus. Whether or not that symbolism was fully developed at the time of this episode, we can certainly see indications of it already. If you think of Xander as the human part of Buffy that loves and cares, then it becomes very interesting that he is so interested in Buffy, and plays such a large role in Season 1 compared to subsequent seasons. Xander starts the episode wobbly and chaotic, before being struck by the sight of Buffy and then being pointed towards the library. The scene with Willow establishes that Xander is not a cerebral person, but that he is trying to change.
From the library, where the books live.
Right, I'm there. See, I want to change.
Then here he tries to introduce himself to Buffy, and gets a glimpse of her secret identity. If you see Xander as part of Buffy, then you can read his scene so far in this episode as a reflection of the way Buffy is beginning to take her wobbly selfhood into a state of consciousness, to the library. Buffy has metaphorically smacked into herself and is struggling to connect to herself. If that all sounds a bit vague or like a stretch right now, don't worry. We'll be talking about it more as we go on.
It's estimated that about 25 million people died in that 1 4-year span. But the fun...
Speaking of parts of Buffy, let's talk about Cordelia and the Jungian concept of the shadow. I intend to keep the philosophizing as accessible as possible in these videos, but I bring up Jung primarily because his ideas seem to unavoidably underlie so much of this show, especially this idea of the shadow. In the Jungian view, the shadow is the part of ourself that is unknown to our conscious mind, usually as a result of repression. The shadow can be good or bad, or both. What matters most is that it's unconscious, it's hidden, it's underground, it's shadowed. In addition, the Jungian view is that by repressing the shadow, people are ironically more liable to be ruled by it, to negative effect, because it is not within their conscious control. In fiction, when this unconscious part of a person is embodied in another character, we call that character a shadow self. So in something like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Hyde is Jekyll's shadow self because he is the embodiment of the monstrous instincts that Jekyll normally suppresses. Similarly, in the case of Buffy, Cordelia acts as Buffy's Season 1 shadow self because she embodies the traits that Buffy is currently suppressing. But in subsequent seasons, other characters like Faith and Spike will take up the same mantle. The reason that the show is obsessed with shadow selves is because it is obsessed with the process of becoming oneself. It's about taking all of these things that are still unknown to you as a teenager, who you are, who you can be, how the world is, how you fit into it, and slowly bringing them into the light of day. Right now, Buffy is keeping many things unconscious. She wants to be normal. She wants to live in her fake identity that is acceptable to the world around her. She doesn't want to be responsible for all the people that might be killed by vampires. This in turn is represented by Cordelia, who tries to befriend Buffy but is unconcerned about the feelings of others. She is Buffy's temptation to self-interest. But of course, Buffy reacts to Cordelia's interest derisively because she cannot yet acknowledge that that part of her exists. That said, on the one hand, Cordelia's immediate interest in Buffy is a clever representation of Buffy being interested in herself in a bad and unacknowledged way. But on the other hand, Cordelia's interest can also be read as a parallel to Xander's interest. It's an indication that Buffy wants to know and reconcile with herself in a positive way. It foreshadows the end of the season when Cordelia eventually becomes aware of the supernatural and participates in fighting against it.
See how you like it.
Last thing before we move on. I want to point out how the costuming here subtly announces Cordelia's shadow role. She and Buffy are wearing complementary colors. Cordelia in a black shirt and green pants, versus Buffy in a light blue and white shirt and red skirt. They are opposites but the same, two sides of one coin. If you took things a bit further, you might also say that their split colors represent what side of the character is on the surface and what side is hidden, a kind of yin and yang. Buffy is our light hero on the surface, but below she is roiling with the red of blood and fire, suppressed vampire Hellmouth things. Meanwhile, Cordelia is a dark antagonist on top, but below she has the capacity for the green of life.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Okay, let's talk about the library. The library has shown up 3 times in this episode already. In the intro, during Xander's conversation with Willow, and during Buffy's conversation with Cordelia. So we know the library is important. If much of the symbolism in Buffy is about the unconscious, then the library, by contrast, is about the conscious. Libraries are repositories of truth and knowledge. They're a realm of the ego. They're the realm of Giles, Buffy's sophist. For the show to start out with a shadowed library means that Buffy's consciousness is still in a shadowed state. That's why Willow points Xander to the library. That's why Cordelia points Buffy to the library too. It's a way of saying, you need to become conscious.
The librarian. I was told you were coming.
Great. So, I'm gonna need perspectives on 20th
I
century.
know what you're after.
That's not what I'm looking for.
In turn, the fact that Buffy then denies Giles shows that she isn't ready for that yet. She isn't ready to become the Slayer. She isn't ready to embrace knowing herself and growing up. But then these next few scenes ruin that yet again. This is the pattern of the episode. Buffy tries to hide and suppress, but immediately finds that she can't. Two girls here talk about Buffy from the outside, just like Xander and Jesse were. But then here comes the horror jump scare, the dead body in the locker.
I live in blue, and she said it.
Buffy's hidden life intrudes yet again, just like the stake in the hallway or the taped together record. Now we have Willow. If Willow is Buffy's spirit, then her meek Season 1 self is very interesting. In Season 1, Willow is closely aligned with Giles, which you can even see from the matching formality of their costumes. Willow is the one excited and impressed by Giles, and similarly inclined to books and school. Both of them are higher level aspects of Buffy's personality, to Xander and Cordelia's lower level. But although there is a positive valence to that similarity, the consciousness side of things, there's also a more negative interpretation, which is connected to the idea of Giles and education as rules, tradition, and authority. Willow cares about following the rules and does things like joke that Buffy cannot legally hang out with both her and Cordelia. Right now, Buffy's spirit is constrained by that need to fit in. She's still trying to abide by the rules.
Totally help you out. If you have 6th period free, we could meet in the library.
Or not. We can meet someplace quieter. Louder. That place just kind of gives me the Wiggins.
Oh, it has that effect on most kids. I love it, though. It's a great collection, and the new librarian is really cool.
He's new.
Yeah, he just started. He was a curator at some British museum, or the British Museum, I'm not sure. But he knows everything, and he brought all these historical volumes and biographies, and am I the single dullest person alive?
Not at all.
Speaking of costuming, I want to point out that Xander's outfit is related to Buffy's, just like Cordelia's. He wears a white button-up over a blue shirt, a variation of Buffy's blue sweater over her white shirt. It's a fitting choice for Buffy's animus, given that the animus is often described as the male element of a female personality. His description of them as old friends very close is a joke, but symbolically it can also be read as yet another indication that he represents part of her, a part she is now becoming less estranged from. And now here that part is, making her aware of her secret identity, which segues into everyone wanting to know Buffy's secrets.
No, actually, it was for self-defense. Everyone has them in LA. Pepper spray is just so passé.
So what do you do for fun? What do you like? What do you look for in a man? Let's hear it.
If you have any dark, painful secrets you'd like us to publish.
Gee, everyone wants to know about me. How keen?
Well, not much.
Which in turn segues into Cordelia making Buffy aware of her secret identity too.
Are these guys bothering you?
No.
She's not hanging out with us.
Hey, Cordelia.
Oh, please. I don't mean to interrupt your downward mobility, but I just wanted to tell you that you won't be meeting Coach Foster, the woman with the chest hair, because gym was canceled due to the extreme dead guy in the locker.
What?
Her consciousness and unconsciousness have now fully collided.
Dead.
Totally dead. Way dead.
It's not just a little dead then.
Don't you have an elsewhere to be?
While this plays, I also want to point out that Cordelia and the other parts of Buffy are currently at odds, which suggests that metaphorically, Buffy is at odds with herself as well. Cordelia makes fun of Willow and calls hanging out with her and Xander downward mobility. Buffy asks whether she can hang out with both the Scoobies and Cordelia, but the answer is no. Throughout the show, Buffy's shadow figures are often voices of isolation, people that tell her that she's above or incompatible with others.
You're still not seeing the big picture, B. Something made us different. We're warriors. We were built to kill.
To kill demons. But it does not mean that we get to pass judgment on people like we're better than everybody else.
We are better.
This in turn acts as a reflection of the ways that shame and self-ignorance make it difficult to truly get close to others. Is that tension between isolation and belonging yet again. So now that this dead guy has burst through into Buffy's consciousness, she is forced to deal with it on that level, the level of the library. So that's where she goes.
Okay, what's the sitch?
Sorry?
Throughout the scene that follows, try viewing it as a conversation that Buffy is actually having with herself.
He's got two little holes in his neck, and all his blood's been drained. Isn't that bizarre? Aren't you just going, ooh?
I was afraid of this.
Well, I wasn't. It's my first day. I was afraid that I was going to be behind in all my classes, that I wouldn't make any friends, that I would have last month's hair. I didn't think there'd be vampires on campus, and I don't care.
And why are you here?
To tell you that I don't care, which I don't, and have now told you. So, bye.
There are a lot of things to say about the rest of this scene, and I'll do my best to try to tie them together. First, I want to point out how Buffy's line about not thinking there would be vampires on campus is a way of highlighting what will become the show's ongoing tactic of using supernatural metaphors to talk about the horrors of growing up. Buffy is worried about what awaits her at this new school, and her struggles get externalized in the form of a vampire attack. But the thing about a metaphor is that it ultimately refers to something real. When Giles talks about how everything you dreaded was under your bed is actually real, I don't think he's just talking about the plot or universe of the show. I think he's also talking about the fact that these supernatural elements of the show are actually connected to real life. The things we shove down in the dark, the things we think we can't talk about, the things we dress up in monsters and masks because it makes them easier to look at, these things are still real. We make art about these things because they're real. But, and bear with me for this means that art and metaphor end up having a complicated dual relationship to reality. On the one hand, art makes reality accessible. It uses metaphor to bring reality into the light of day. But on the other hand, art can obscure reality just as much. It has the power to valorize, demonize, and generally romanticize things, without care to whether it's saying anything real. And I think that Buffy, as a show, is very preoccupied with this duality. Buffy is a mythological genre show, so packed to the brim with tropes it was actually the origin of the TV Tropes website. But equally, as we've discussed already, Buffy is engaged in criticizing and subverting the very same myths and genres it uses.
Stop! Stop telling stories! Life isn't a story.
So in this scene, we have Giles in his tweedy suit, looking like an archetype of patriarchal tradition, telling Buffy about her mythological role. She is the chosen one, bound by duty to live a short, brutish, and isolated life. And Buffy is immediately irreverent towards Giles' storytelling. On the one hand, Buffy's irreverence is part and parcel of her current state of repression. But on the other hand, her irreverence is also pointing at something positive. It's pointing at the church organ nature of what Giles is saying. The myth and tradition that Giles is proposing is actually pretty messed up, and Buffy, both the character and the show, rightfully draw attention to that. But at the same time, Buffy has nothing to replace it with. Right now, she is denying both myth and reality. She has yet to find a middle ground. She has yet to define her own identity and develop a relationship to reality that is on her own terms. Now okay, we're back to the consciousness stuff. Xander has made it to the library, and an upper level of the library at that, which of course echoes Buffy herself going to the library. He's become fully conscious of Buffy's secret identity, just as Buffy has become unable to deny that identity. Then notice how Giles follows Buffy out of the library. Buffy's consciousness is now following her into the real world. It's no longer a quiet, spooky, isolated place, but something that is dogging her, trying to get her attention. And then here's the punchline that drives home all of this imagery and symbolism about surface things versus hidden things.
Oh, come on. This is Sunnydale. How bad and evil can there be here?
Watch the camera take us literally from the surface to the underground. Also notice those stained glass windows on the way down that tell us we're looking at the rubble of a church. More on the significance of that in a second. First, this is a very pointed line coming up.
The sleeper will wake.
It ties directly into the idea of Buffy as someone who needs to become conscious, and sets up the Master as a foil for Buffy, which he'll remain throughout the season. It's also a follow-up to Buffy's jump scare wake-up at the end of her dream. Notice how the Master and his acolytes are all wrapped up in concepts of tradition. They're associated with religion, given the way they live in a church and perform rituals that end with Amen. This whole torch and candlelit cavern aesthetic is also straight out of the tradition of Gothic horror. If you look closely at the church fragments, you'll even notice that they're architecturally Gothic in style. The Master's throne also suggests royalty and traditions of state, not to mention his name, which suggests old-fashioned forms of power and hierarchy. In other words, the Master, like Giles and his mythology, embodies that church organ from the opening credits. Exactly the thing that Buffy's youth and rocking attitude are meant to eventually overcome. Which of course is why we have to cut to Buffy being her young teenager self right after all that pomp.
Hi, I'm an enormous slut. Hello, would you like a copy of The Watchtower? I used to be so good at this.
That little show reads as a joke, but I think it's also a reference to Buffy's divide itself. She doesn't know what persona to embody right now. This confusion is further highlighted by Joyce's innocent optimism that clearly knows nothing about Buffy's secret life, forcing Buffy to perform for her. Keep in mind that we're once again in Buffy's bedroom, which means it's appropriate to be thinking about Buffy and her identity.
Oh, we may have found a space today.
That's great.
Oh, and that school is a very nurturing environment, which is just what you need.
Well, actually...
Oh, not too nurturing.
But despite all that talk of metaphor, I also just want to highlight the simple realism of this scene. This scene could be out of any movie about a mom and her teenage kid, and rings true in a completely non-supernatural way. Which is a side of this show that I think is just as deliberately included as any of the heightened symbolism and genre tropes. Notice that we get this scene immediately after the scene in the cavern. It brings things back to Earth, connecting all that goofy genre stuff to the simple experience of being a teenage girl who wants to fit in and whose mom doesn't totally get her. It's the reality side of the show's tension between mythology and reality that I was discussing earlier. And now we're back to the horror tropes. This time, the trope is the teenage girl tracked through empty nighttime streets by a shadowy pursuer, and later seemingly trapped into an alley. Of course, as usual, this trope will end up subverted by having Buffy be the one to get the physical upper hand and tackle the person in the shadows instead. This sequence is pretty much a direct parallel to the episode's opening scene. Both feature a long, slow, horror movie build-up that ends with the girl being the actual source of danger. Also, once again, note this imagery of one person above versus another person below. Speaking of danger, let's talk about Angel. On the surface, it might seem that this scene is also subverting expectations by having the horror movie stalker turn out to be an ally rather than an enemy. But I actually think that the sinister way that Angel is introduced is very important. His first shots associate him with shadows and obscurity. He gives Buffy a cross, but this gift is rendered ambiguous by the fact that so far, the episode has only linked religious iconography to dark things like the Master and Buffy's ominous dreams. Moreover, he is costumed just like Darla and the dated vampire from the Bronze, with a black blazer over a collared shirt. And both of those vampires are shown in this episode using their human face to seduce a victim to their death. I also think it's significant that he finishes this scene telling Buffy that he is not necessarily her friend. While on a character level, Angel ultimately proves to not have intentions of harm towards Buffy, he does end up harming her nonetheless. And I think this introductory symbolism is pointing at what that harm will represent for Buffy. Unlike Cordelia, who fully speaks her mind, Angel is shrouded in secrecy and ambiguity, and never seems to say anything directly. All of Buffy's shadow selves have a tendency to wear their thoughts and feelings on their sleeves, because they are the thoughts and feelings that Buffy is trying to contain.
God, I'm so unhappy.
By contrast, Angel is almost the opposite of a shadow self. He's a man who's in full denial of his shadow, and therefore poses a danger because he is not in control of that shadow. He is a man whose self is divided, whose interior does not match his exterior. He has a white shirt on the inside, but a black blazer on the outside. He wears a handsome face and an angelic name, but they conceal a vampiric nature. He appears to be a love interest, but he will eventually become a villain. In this way, Angel acts as a parallel for Buffy and her own currently divided self. She is denying her slayerness and keeping her identity secret, just as Angel conceals his vampire status and brutal past. In turn, Buffy's eventual attraction to him can be read as her attraction to this sort of self-denial, her attraction to the romantic surface of things that makes it easier to ignore that which is hidden. But more on all of this as the show goes on. It's worth listening to the lyrics playing during this scene because they're quite relevant to the episode's ideas around identity. They include lines about looking for purpose and feeling that one's inner self is unseen and unheard. The emphasis on having questions is also a fitting follow-up to the ambiguity and uncertainty that the scene with Angel introduced. I also just want to comment on the use of the bronze in this show. There will be more to say about it in future episodes, so I'll keep it short. But in general, I like that by using real bands to perform diegetic music, the show is able to interject a kind of meta-awareness into almost every episode. It blurs a line between fiction and reality that the show will prove to love blurring in many other ways as the seasons go on.
And you can sing along.
In addition, the song acts as a perfect lead-in to that painfully realistic mistaken wave that shows yet again how Buffy lacks a place in the world right now. Even Buffy is experiencing fake-outs now. And then here comes Willow to act as Buffy's counterpart in isolation.
Hey. Oh, hi. Hi. Oh, you here with someone?
No, I'm just here. I thought Xander was gonna show up.
Oh, are you guys going out?
No, we're just friends. We used to go out, but we broke up.
How come?
He stole my Barbie. Oh, we were 5.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't actually date a whole lot lately.
Why not?
Well, when I'm with a boy I like, it's hard for me to say anything cool or witty or at all. I can usually make a few vowel sounds and then I have to go away.
It's not that bad.
No, it is. I think boys are more interested in a girl who can talk.
You really haven't been dating lately.
It's probably easy for you.
Yeah, real easy.
What I want to highlight here is the issues of communication.
Talking about communication. Talking about language. Not the same thing.
Just as Angel was not communicating with Buffy, and just as Buffy is unable to communicate the truth of herself to others, so too does Willow have trouble with communication. If Willow is Buffy's spirit, then it's significant that right now, Willow is lonely and inarticulate. It echoes the way that because Buffy cannot tell people about herself, she ends up isolated. In turn, we'll see in a second that because Willow doesn't know about the supernatural, and because she nervously plays by the rules, this leaves her vulnerable to vampires. It's the shadow repression stuff again. By denying shadowy vampire things, by telling Willow to live large despite the real possibility of vampires in their midst, Buffy puts her in danger, or metaphorically, puts her own self in danger. And now for even more isolation imagery, as well as imagery of things being above and below. This scene can be read as a counterpart to the last scene between Buffy and Giles in the library. Giles has once again followed Buffy into her regular life, just like he followed her into the hallway earlier. He's lurking above her, like a conscience, again forcing Buffy into a state of consciousness that she's been trying to avoid. The scene will soon get very literal about Buffy's lack of consciousness regarding the things she doesn't want to think about, when Giles asks Buffy to sense the vampires around them, and Buffy doesn't bother to. Furthermore, it's significant that in order to talk to Giles, Buffy has to leave Willow and the dance floor and go up to this shadowy realm detached from the rest of the world. Her consciousness is not integrated with the rest of her life, and she doesn't think it can be. By denying the shadow side of her life, by keeping it secret, Buffy must isolate herself in order to be conscious of it, or have any relationship to it. It's no coincidence that Dead Things, an episode that features a severely ashamed and self-isolating Buffy, ends up calling directly back to the scene. Compare these two bits of dialogue.
No, don't close your eyes. Look at them. That's not your world. Look at them. Throwing themselves about, completely unaware of the danger that surrounds them.
Lucky them.
It's also significant that Giles is the voice of isolation in this episode, given his relationship to authority and institutions. In Season 6, Spike is the voice of Buffy's shame, because in Season 6, Buffy is an adult, and her isolation is coming from herself, and Spike is the symbolic manifestation of that. But in Season 1, Buffy's youth means that it's external things like rules and institutions and traditions and mythologies that make her think she has to be a lone vigilante above the concept of friends. In other words, in Season 1 and the early seasons in general, authority and institutions are portrayed as an enormous force of shame and isolation, a force that contributes to Buffy's shadow being repressed, and that Buffy therefore needs to overcome.
My mom doesn't even get out of bed anymore, and the doctor says it's Epstein-Barr.
I also want to comment on the way we go directly from Giles talking about the nightmares that Buffy hasn't admitted to.
It's not as though you've been having the nightmares.
To this scene with Cordelia. It's yet another way of hinting at her role as the shadow. In the Jungian view, dreams are a gateway to two types of the unconscious. First, to what's known as the collective unconscious, a reservoir of universal, archetypal symbolism and mythology. But secondly, they're also a gateway to the more personal unconscious, the realm of the shadow. The first time we see Buffy's dream, the iconography makes it easy to read as a sinister take on the collective unconscious, befitting the show's ambivalent relationship to myth in general. But the Jungian view is also that nightmares are frequently a symptom of an unintegrated shadow, a sign that you're not dealing with your unconscious, which right now, as we've discussed, Buffy isn't.
I didn't say I'd never slay another vampire. It's not like I have all these fluffy bunny feelings for them. I'm just not gonna get way extracurricular with it.
She isn't dealing with either the myth and tradition that haunts her, or with anything else she doesn't want to think about. So by subtly linking Buffy's nightmares to Cordelia, the episode makes a connection between them.
True demonic visage.
You're like a textbook with arms. I know this.
The point is, a Slayer should be able to see them anyway. Without looking, without thinking. Can you tell me if there's a vampire in this building?
Maybe.
You should know. Even through this mass and this din, you should be able to sense them. Well, try. Reach out with your mind. You have to hone your senses, focus until the energy washes over you, until you feel every particle of it.
There's one.
Where?
Right there, talking to that girl.
You don't know.
Oh, please. Look at his...
But for all that I've been talking about the things that Buffy is struggling to do, she is still our hero, and in a second we'll see why. She's not just our hero because she can undermine Giles' puffed-up genre mentor shtick with a perky attitude, although that's part of it. She's our hero precisely because the process of becoming oneself is so damn hard. It isn't easy to confront the unknowns about yourself and come out the other side. They're unknowns for a reason. They might feel like monsters and death and blood. Yet Buffy tries anyway. She is, by turns, testy and terrified at the idea of being the Slayer, but when push comes to shove, she still cannot let someone get hurt. Metaphorically, she is still going to try to grow up. She's going to come down off of her balcony and deal with the problems down below. Now we've got one more scene to complete the episode's trilogy of horror movie scenes with twist endings. Just like the opening scene in the high school, and just like the stalking scene with Angel, the camera guides us through a long, slow, shadowy horror movie buildup. Only this time, the perspective is shifted. Now the perspective is tight on Buffy, who is the person doing the hunting. There's still dread about what might happen to her, or what is just outside her line of sight. But Buffy is no longer the target, instead starting to demonstrate agency within her horror movie idiom. And once again, this build-up ends with a surprise, with Cordelia as the innocent object of Buffy's stake.
Cordelia!
This twist is great because of how it indicates that Cordelia, for all her meanness, is not actually the bad guy of the show. Notice how instead of wearing complementary colors, Cordelia and Buffy are now wearing matching colors. Buffy is still wearing a blue shirt over a white shirt, but now Cordelia has a blue dress and white purse too. Buffy's shadow is not actually something to be feared. Her shadow is just her. And that's what choosing to dive into the unknown gets you. It seems scary, but by confronting it, you can prevent becoming the villain. Fittingly, that scene then ends with Cordelia hilariously demanding to know Buffy's childhood trauma and about to tell everyone she knows about what Buffy just did. By deliberately diving into the shadows and quite literally confronting her shadow self, Buffy's secret identity has developed more cracks than ever. So if Cordelia isn't the real bad guy of the show, then who is? That's right, vampires. Here we even get a direct comparison between Cordelia and Darla. Darla, Cordelia, and Buffy have each been the girl at the heart of a twist horror ending. Darla and her blonde schoolgirl aesthetic has a superficial resemblance to Buffy as well. But if Cordelia is Buffy's shadow, a part of Buffy that Buffy ultimately needs to integrate, then Darla is the vampire opposite, like Angel. She is a character who causes harm with the aid of a hidden identity. We see how Jesse cannot distinguish between Cordelia and Darla, and he gets turned as a result. In general, it's worth talking about why this show is called Buffy the Vampire Slayer and not Buffy the Demon Slayer or Buffy's Creek. Vampires are the villains of the show because they represent the opposite of what the show thinks Buffy should be. They are ageless, forever stuck in a state of arrested development. They only grow older, never up. Moreover, as I was discussing earlier, their selves are fundamentally divided. They have human exteriors that conceal monstrous interiors. Notice how we transition from Darla's smiling face to these distorted faces down below. To be a vampire is to be constantly concealing your identity. In turn, the show draws a connection between stagnancy and deception and being harmful towards others. To exist, vampires have to take life from people because they have no life of their own. They have no ability to change or grow. To be restored, the master depends upon a harvest. He depends upon the result of growth, but doesn't grow anything himself. The master reaps, but he doesn't sow. He is trapped in this church, like Buffy feels trapped in her duty, but he cannot escape it under his own power. He can only steal it. He is born from blood, but it's a perversion of actual birth or baptism. He also specifically requests something young.
Luke. Yes.
Bring me something young.
In total, he is a Nosferatu-like figure of age and genre, who's risen from below to literally suck the life from youth. To quote Season 7.
From beneath you, it devours.
Or in this case, wants to suck the life from Buffy's spirit. It's significant that this show's vampires operate in crypts and cemeteries and other markers of death. It emphasizes that they are not just physically, but also spiritually dead. They are stagnant. As Darla will say in a bit.
Oh, you're not going anywhere.
They can neither live nor begin a cycle of rebirth by truly dying.
I know a shortcut.
By contrast, now that Buffy has chosen to move forward instead of staying stuck like the Master, her identity becomes fully out in the open between her and Xander. Instead of keeping her identity secret, Buffy is now actively being serious about the truth and asking for Xander's help.
Oh, hey, I hope he's not a vampire because then you might have to slay him.
Was there a school bulletin? Was it in the newspaper? Is there anyone in this town who doesn't know I'm the Slayer?
I only know that you think that you're the Slayer, and the reason why I know
Look, whatever, it doesn't matter. Just tell me, where would Willow go?
You're serious.
We don't find her, and there's gonna be one more dead body in the morning.
This scene with Willow reverses the opening scene and plays the original trope straight. the dangerous man dragging a girl off to a darkened makeout spot. The overdone horror trope is coming for Buffy, just like it comes for Jessie and the boy in the opening scene, unless she can be strong enough to overthrow it. Luckily, her spirit is now draped in red, perhaps no longer quite so meek, however it might appear right this second.
What you got in the basket, little girl?
Weapons.
This whole scene really works to equate the cemetery and mausoleum with being trapped. This overhead shot emphasizes how small and empty the space is, and that there are no ways out. These tight frames on Willow's face, as well as on Willow and the vampire earlier, are similarly claustrophobic. The vampire told Willow that the cemetery was a shortcut, but all it's led to is this literal dead end. The nihilistic spiritual deadness that vampires represent. Not changing, not caring, not growing up. Might seem like a shortcut, but this is all it leads to a trap that's going to eat you alive.
I did.
Hey, head up.
Oh my God, Jesse!
You know, he gave me a hickey.
I got hungry on the way.
Oh, Jesse, let's get out of here.
Oh, you're not going anywhere.
Leave us alone!
You're not going anywhere until we fed.
Which, of course, is Buffy's cue. She shows up to make fun of the vampire's stagnancy, joking about the dated clothing and the crypt's lack of decoration. Quippiness has since become a hallmark of Whedon's style, for better and often for worse. But back in Buffy, it served a real purpose. It marked Buffy as youthful and defiant in the face of all the clomping tradition that wanted to consume her.
What's with the outfit? Live in the now, okay? You look like DeBarge. Now, we can do this the hard way, or, well, actually, there's just the hard way.
That's fine with me.
Are you sure? Now, this is not going to be pretty. We're talking violence, strong language, adult content.
And it's with that exact defiance that Buffy kills her first vampire of the show.
See what happens when you roughhouse?
He was young and stupid.
Now, Darla's questions about who Buffy is culminate the identity arc that's been going on all episode. The episode started with Darla's identity being secret. Then we had Willow, Xander, Jessie, Flutie, Cordelia, Giles, and even random girls at Sunnydale High, each by turns not knowing who Buffy is. Then we reversed things in the Angel scene, with Buffy being the one to ask Angel who he was, while Angel kept his identity secret.
Who are you? Don't you know?
I don't care.
But now the question is being put directly to Buffy, and unlike in Season 3, she can't quite answer.
Who are you?
I'm Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, and you are?
And her inability to answer is equated with the episode's cliffhanger peril. It throws her back into a place of disadvantage. Will Buffy ever be able to know herself and be herself? Or will she be consumed by others? Will she grow up, or will she, like the Master hopes, belong to the old ones? Will she be stuck in the stagnant cemetery, or will she escape? This is the question of the show. The way this scene is shot emphasizes Buffy's new state of disadvantage. Buffy is no longer the one being shot from below or being shown to be above things. Luke is. Instead, Buffy is being shot from above in a way that makes her look smaller. Suddenly, Buffy's youth and life feels weak, and Luke's age and death feel strong. It's not just that Buffy's physical life is in peril, it's that her strength to grow up in the face of all the things that might hold her back is metaphorically in question.
You're wasting my time.
Hey, I had other plans too, okay?
You think you can stop me? Stop us? You have no idea what you're dealing with.
Luke's threat that she doesn't know what she's dealing with is genuinely the threat of the episode and show. It's all the things still unknown and obscure to Buffy, including herself, that are most in danger of overwhelming her.
The third day of the newest light will come the harvest. when the blood of men will flow as wine, when the Master will walk among them once more. The earth will belong to the old ones, and hell itself will come to town.
The episode's final shots then take this imagery even further. Buffy is tossed into a grave, a symbol of death that the show will revisit many times over in the future, with a secret, terrifying thing she's been repressing looming over her: a vampire. Welcome to the Hellmouth, this episode says. Welcome to your unconscious. Welcome to the unknown. Welcome to growing up. You better learn to deal with it, or it will eventually deal with you. And that's all for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Season 1, Episode 1, Welcome to the Hellmouth. See you in the next one.